What's going on, guys? It's Ken. I'm back with another video. Today I wanted to reply to a comment that I received on a video that I made last year about the LYNX HILO versus the Apollo X6 DA converters. So basically what I did was I compared the DA converters from the LYNX HILO and my Apollo X6. I compared them not in the monitoring aspect, but the line outs, feeding an analog chain for mastering. I captured with the same AD converter to keep the test fair. And then the two files I basically uploaded for you guys to listen to. The difference was there, but it was pretty hard to notice. Like it was really hard to notice it, but it was there though. The average person may not hear it. But the comment basically said, if you get the chance, can you do the same test with a new Apollo X6 or greater Gen 2 interface, since UA claims to have upgraded their converters? So this video is about the new Apollo interfaces, their X line. They made a Generation 2 line, so now they got the X6 Gen 2, X8 Gen 2, and so on. They claim to have better converters, especially their DA converters. I've seen videos online saying that they are slightly better. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any of the units, any of the new units to test and show you guys. So I'm just going to be reading off some specs and data and giving my opinion. Now, like I said, people have said online that the difference between the Gen 2 Apollos and the Generation 1, it's there, but it's not the biggest difference. I do want to say, first off, I feel like if you don't have one of the Apollo rack mount interfaces, then it's definitely worth it to go ahead and get like an X6 Gen 2 or one of the Generation 2 X line interfaces. But if you have already like an X6 or an X8, it's probably not worth it to upgrade to the Gen 2. I think you're better off upgrading and just getting better converters, spending more money. There's other brands that you could probably look into, but to go from the Gen 1 to Gen 2 might not be really worth it. You might not hear that much of a difference. But if you, let's say, have like an Apollo Twin or like a UAD Volt, an interface like that, then going from those types of beginner interfaces, and don't get me wrong, you're going to get a great sound with any of those interfaces. I used an Apollo Twin for a long time. I made great music on it, great sounding music. You would have never thought it was recorded on it. Even like a Focusrite Scarlett Solo, like, or UAD Volt. If you have like one of those interfaces, something that's like less than $1,000, I would say, then upgrading to a Gen 2 Apollo X interface, I think that'll be much more worth it. But let's just go over the specs. So first off, I want to show you guys, I want to make sure this is right. I want to show you guys the site. So this is the UAD website. These are the specs for their new Generation 2 interfaces, all right? So this is the X6 Generation 2. Let's scroll down. You can see negative 127 decibels of true or total harmonic distortion. If I hover over it, it says Apollo X Gen 2 converters let you record with unprecedented low noise and distortion. Now, notice this decimal, 0.000045%. That is a good number. Generally, you want that number to be as low as possible. The more zeros, the better. That is a good percent to see. Now, I'm pretty sure this is talking about the AD converters. I don't know if this is for the DA converters as well. If this is for the DA converters, then that's good. Now, if we scroll up a little bit, I'm not sure if it's going to say any other specs on here. I'm going to try scrolling down. No, it doesn't say it. It says enhanced DA for critical monitoring and playback with 130 decibels dynamic range and low total harmonic distortion of negative 127 decibels. So that seems to be the same. If we scroll back up to where we were, right? So negative 127 decibels total harmonic distortion, studio grade DA conversion. But then if you hover over it, it says Gen 2 converters let you record with, so record is implying AD conversion, but this says studio grade DA conversion. So it might be the same. Now 130 decibels dynamic range, ultra low noise recording. But then it says enhanced monitor DA delivers the widest dynamic range. So they could be the same specs, but either way though, 130 decibels of dynamic range is good. And negative 127 decibels total harmonic distortion with this decimal 0.000045%. That is a good number. I want you guys to keep that in mind. If we go to the actual manual now for the Apollo X6 Generation 2, okay, these are the specifications. Line outputs, you can see dynamic range 127 decibels for the line outputs, and then total harmonic distortion plus noise negative 119 decibels. So this is for the line outputs. That's not that same decimal we just saw, but if we go to the monitor outputs, you can see that the total harmonic distortion is negative 127 decibels with that same decimal. So also with the higher dynamic range, if I'm not mistaken, it seems like the monitor outputs have better specifications than the line outputs. I mean, even here too, frequency response, this 0.02 decibels is lower. Ideally, you would want that to be lower because it's implying that it could be more accurate. But this is implying that the monitor outputs might be better sounding technically than the line outputs. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is these numbers, like, there is a difference, but the difference is still, it's not the biggest difference, but it is still pretty significant. I will say that. If we go back, 130 dynamic range, negative 127, 130. So yeah, these specs from the website match up with the monitor outputs, not the line outputs. That's something to keep in mind. If we go to the Apollo X6 hardware manual, all right, monitor outputs negative 118 decibels of total harmonic distortion compared to the negative 127 decibels, right? The line outputs and the monitor outputs have very similar total harmonic distortion, but I will say though, this jump from, even from the monitor output, negative 118 jump to negative 127, that is a pretty significant jump. I'll say that. And dynamic range, it looks like the regular X6, the older X6 has 125 decibels of dynamic range compared to 130 dynamic range on the Gen 2 for the monitor outs. Now, the line outputs for the Gen 2 have 127 decibels of dynamic range and 129 decibels. Wait, I'm sorry about that. 127 for the Gen 2, 127 for the Gen 1. So they are the same on the line outputs. But they have the same total harmonic distortion as well for the line outputs. So it seems like the monitor outputs are buffed and better on the Gen 2, but the line outputs seem to be the same, which is pretty interesting. Now, interesting enough, for the X6 actually has more dynamic range on its monitor outputs, but it has a little bit better total harmonic distortion performance on the line outputs. Something interesting. That's something interesting. Now, that video that I made also talked about the LYNX HILO. So let's take a look at the LYNX HILO specifications. On their website, for line out, it says negative 109 decibels, total harmonic distortion and noise, right? If we go to monitor output, it says negative 107 decibels, total harmonic distortion plus noise. Dynamic range, 121 decibels for the monitor outputs. Dynamic range, 121 decibels of dynamic range. If we go to the LYNX manual, line output, dynamic range, 121 decibels, and total harmonic distortion noise, negative 109. Monitor outputs, negative 107 decibels, dynamic range, 121 decibels of dynamic range. If we compare the monitor outputs, 121 decibels compared to the Gen 2, 130 decibels dynamic range. It seems like the Apollo X6 Gen 2 has more dynamic range for its monitor outs. Let's compare the line outs though. Dynamic range, 127 decibels for the line outs. Going back to the LYNX HILO line out, 121 decibels. So it seems like the Apollo X6 Gen 2 has better dynamic range and possibly better total harmonic distortion performance. Now, listen, I'm going to say this right now. I have experience using a LYNX HILO. I've mixed songs on it. I've heard plenty of music on it. The LYNX HILO is known to be a very clean sounding device. What you put in, you get out. It's a very clean, transparent sounding converter. Some people will argue that it's actually too clean. You know what I'm saying? Some people like an analog sound. I'm pretty shocked about these specs. Now looking at these specs, I really do want to hear the Apollo X6 Gen 2 converters, because the fact that it has this much more dynamic range and better total harmonic distortion performance, now it just makes me curious. Like I really do want to hear what it sounds like. These specs, there is a difference number wise, but when it comes to the actual sound, it might actually be really hard to hear the difference unless you're listening on a good monitoring system. So that's why when it comes to upgrading, I don't know if upgrading from the regular X6 or the first gen X6 interface to the Gen 2 interface, I don't know if that upgrade is going to be worth it, because they already sound good, and I don't know if that upgrade will be worth it. If you have an interface, let's say like a UAD Volt or Apollo Twin, that upgrade might be more worth it to go to the Gen 2. When it comes to DA converters, generally they are less expensive to make and easier to make. So that's why most middle grade DA converters will sound good, and it's going to be harder to hear a difference unless you really start to spend a lot more money. Now, when it comes to AD conversion, that's a different story. It's more expensive and harder to make an AD converter generally. So that's something else. But also, when it comes to comparing these units, like, you want to really figure out what you need it for. The LYNX HILO is generally for mixing and mastering. It doesn't have phantom power. So that's something to keep in mind too. These Apollo interfaces are really good for people that kind of do everything, recording, even mixing and mastering. That's the thing. Like, I've never really considered Apollo converters to be mastering grade. They claim with this generation 2 though, they claim to be mastering grade now. I'm not with the specs. It's possible, but it's something that you would just really have to hear for yourself. And like I said, I am curious, but that's something to consider too. Like, if you have an Apollo X6 and you want to get into mixing and mastering work, then it might be worth it to go to like a HILO or another interface that because you might not need the phantom power, and you might be going for more inputs and outputs and different digital options and stuff like that, digital ins and outs. But you really got to figure out what interface is going to work for you and what you're doing. But I could be wrong though. I just wanted to display the specifications of these three interfaces and kind of give my opinion. If you guys have any other thoughts or questions, definitely let me know in the comment section below. And of course, if I missed anything, definitely let me know. If you guys want more videos like this, let me know in the comment section below. Check out the links in the description if you guys need mixing or mastering. Hit me up. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.